All right, hello everybody. It's my great pleasure to announce our next panel, Next Generation Network and Reliability. So a special mention about this panel, it is our first all-women panel for the cloud track. So let's explore how these women are leading the charge in this critical area of technology. So I'd like to welcome Nidhi Wadmark, our incredible moderator, as well as our panels, to lead the sessions.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for still staying in the room. I know it's sort of leading to the end of the day. But, I think all the conversations that have led up to now have highlighted that the importance of secure, reliable, and high-speed network are table stakes. The advancement in technologies like 5G network, virtualization, AI, ML, I think have really revolutionized how current businesses need to think as they're building their networks. So before we get into the Q&A, I did want to take an opportunity to introduce each of our panelists because I think it's important, as Privy highlighted, this is also the first all-women's panel, and I really like the change of scenery, and I hope we will not be the last, but I think giving you some context to our panelists will give you a little bit more importance as to why their lived experiences and expertise that we'll get to know is so important today. So to my left is Sudha Mahajan. Sudha is a partner and general manager at Microsoft. Prior to that, she has led leadership positions at eBay and TiVo and Yahoo. She was named as the most admired businesswoman in 2019, and recently CXO magazine did give her a very well-recognized article as a global leader. Next to Sudha is Monica, who's also a very good friend of mine, and we've known each other for almost ever, it feels like it. She currently leads the engineering team at Okta. Prior to that, she's held leadership roles at Workday, UKG, Perforce, and NetApp. Outside of work, she's very active with the Boy Scouts, mentorship, diversity, and uplifting women and young girls. And right next to her is Ashi. Ashi currently she's the director of software development at LinkedIn, and prior to LinkedIn, she's led development teams at Oracle, Citrix, and McAfee. She's a huge advocate of women in tech and the 50-50 movement. So with that, why don't we get into our first Q&A? So Sudha, my first question goes to you. What do you see as the most significant advancement in network and, and the general impact that it has in the business space?
Networking is not a new area, but as we have moved to cloud, a lot of advancements has come into this area. So let me just share my thoughts where I believe that, networking will be in the leading edge of technology when it comes to cloud. First thing I believe is 5G networks. That's an amazing innovation, and it's here to grow. It's a new way of mobile networking, bringing it closer to the customers. And when I talk about these technologies, the biggest thing that comes to my mind is what kind of use cases are we going to solve? Healthcare, smart cities, autonomous cars. We need this kind of technology where the latency can be minimal, the disruptions has to be minimal, and we can reach to the customers on time. So 5G is number one that I think. Edge computing. So this is not new to you guys. Many of the panelists, before me spoke about edge computing. In fact, I own some of the edge services in Azure Cloud, and I can tell you, particularly our customers are looking for low latency. And when we talk about reliability and low latency, computing on the edge, where your users are, the storage on the edge is extremely becoming important. How efficiently you're able to do it, that is the picture that you have to nail down. Third thing, I believe, AI and ML. Maybe I wouldn't have stressed on it, if it was a year ago, but today I'll say AI and ML is an extremely important area. If you're not thinking about it, then start thinking about it now. The reason behind that is, look at networks. As I said, networking is not a new place or new space. 20 years, 30 years ago, people were setting up the networks. Now they're just setting it up in the cloud. There's certain things which are redundant. These tasks can easily be automated. And with the help of AI and ML, you can also predict where the new packet losses are going to happen and how do I preempt that. So some of these technologies are very innovative and advanced. Modern CDN, I would say, is another area to look at. New protocols which are coming in are important to look at. What customers are asking for, some of these things from the data centers to edge, all these new technologies are definitely going to rock the world. And Monica, I'd like to give it to you if you want to share your thoughts.
Definitely. Sudha, you touched on a few things, and I'm going to touch on 3 key important things. One is protocol development. As you know, like QUIC, which is the Quick UDP Internet Protocol, which multiplexes the UDP connections, and it is all about improving the internet performance, which is really, really important. The second part is the edge computing, the cloud computing. As you can see, like a lot of containerization, microservices, but there is a concept of service mesh, which is really, really important in microservices, and how do you manage them, and how do you make it secure? So the whole MTLS protocol behind that is really, really important as a part of cloud computing. And then the edge computing part, where the 5G, so that what you mentioned, but there is also part of about 5G network build outs, which is like the 5G we take for granted, but it is not everywhere. So it's really important. The amount of money which is being poured in 5G is enormous. And what we want to do is like having those network build out like a cluster at the tower, where the request is not going all the way till cloud and it is very close to the edge. It's really important. The second part is the whole AI ML piece. So when we work with all these CDNs, they have a lot of data coming from multiple vendors. Like I work at Okta, we use CDN. Obviously, I don't have all the data patterns which are needed for threat protection. And when you have these CDN vendors, they play with a lot of data from a lot of customers. And it's really important that they can generate that AI ML platform, the models, which is really helpful for us. And then, of course, last is the CDN, like Microsoft, Akamai, which really helps us build that edge computing and caching at the edge as well.
So, Ashi, with that, how do you balance the need in your day-to-day for the need, the need for scalability, reliability, and security as you build and scale network infrastructure?
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, great question here. So I know, we heard about the new innovations that are coming in, but when you are really starting out building your network infrastructure, and you have to balance the need for scale, the need for being reliable, the need for security, I think you have to take a very holistic approach. Like in whether it's a small company or large company, you really have to have a holistic approach in figuring it out, who are your customers, right? If I'm a small company, maybe scale is where I need to invest a lot in. And scale, how do I get scale? Maybe I need to understand, in designing my network infrastructure, I need to understand what is my usage pattern, right? What is my site QPS going to be like? Based on that, the design would be created. Then another big part is reliability, right? When you're thinking about reliability, it's literally like once you have done the scale, any medium-sized, large-sized company, reliability is the backbone. It is how you get your customers to really trust you. You're looking at, are you able to do failovers, successful failovers? Are you able to have data redundancy? All that is a part of having a very reliable network. Then during the design phase, you also have to understand what is your customer's risk appetite. That determines how secure you want your network to be. Like if, I worked in companies that are selling to a government organization, they're selling it to banks. For them, security is table stakes. Their risk tolerance for any kind of vulnerability is very, very low. So when designing that network, you have to make sure security is forefront. Now that is just the design piece of things. Like once you have done this design, keeping the scale, reliability, and security in mind, then you need to figure out how you're going to actually make it happen, right? Or we talked a lot about automation. Like we need to be able to make sure that humans, Sanjay was talking about, zero touch and zero security vulnerabilities, right? How do you do that? Humans cannot scale to that level. So once you've designed this infrastructure, the development principles need to be there, which is, do automation, do containerization. I know a lot of folks talked about, but how else do you scale your network? You've created these microservices, but if you're going to go on with the old monolithic architecture, you are really not going to be able to scale quickly. Kubernetes offers a convergent architecture, right? So designing the network is the key, keeping all these factors in mind, then actually doing and practicing this with good practices like automation and deployment strategies. And last but not the least, the biggest part of balance comes in try those things. I'm a huge proponent of having hack days. Hack your own system. Do chaos testing. Try to figure out what happens. What is your customer going to experience in the future? When you try that out, you will actually find holes in your own areas for security, networking, and reliability, and you will be able to fix them. So that's sort of my advice would be to what to do when you're designing your network infrastructure.
A lot of good problems to solve. So Monica, network and reliability, like the table stakes. What are some of the challenges that you have encountered and also see the opportunities for innovation in this space?
Well, one is when you look at this piece, a lot of times when we think about scale, we take scale for granted. And it's a fallacy, that the load is going to be steady state, because as you can see, the load keeps on changing. And we need to make sure that in this economy, it's important to understand whether you are using the right workloads, as many people mentioned, whether you're making sure, you're using your cloud and network very efficiently, so bot versus usage. So fine tuning is really important. And same thing, the COGS part is really important. As engineering leaders, many times we just ignore, we think it's free, but it is not. It is super expensive, so it's really important to keep that in mind. Security, you touched a lot. So security is really important. One of the things which is super critical is, as you all know, security teams are very small. And in order to make the best use and prevent these, the cyber attacks, the vulnerabilities which are happening more than ever, it's really important to build that security first mindset in your teams. And pretty much I would say launch security champion programs, which we have done in my team, that every team has a security champion which works with the security experts, and we bring that knowledge in-house. So that has really helped. So those are really important pieces. Yeah.
That's really great to know. So go ahead, Sudha.
I was thinking, as Monica was talking about it, a couple of things that comes to my mind when we think about reliability and scalability. Imagine most of the enterprises that comes to a hyperscaler are not particularly coming to find one feature or another. They want the reliability of the cloud. They want the cloud to scale up and down. Some of the things which I think are extremely important, because moving to cloud may not be that cost efficient, especially when you bring more and more storage, you need more replication of the data. So how do you do that? Auto scaling up and down as per your needs is really an important feature or the function of the cloud that needs to happen. And when it comes to reliability, one thing to think about is how you're making your own site redundant. So if you need, for example, some connectivity from on-prem to cloud, are you only relying on one single circuit, or you're adding another circuit as well? Because you don't know what you don't know. Tomorrow, an accident can happen and you can lose connectivity, which means hundreds and thousands of your customers can be affected. So think about that. When you're moving to hyperscaler, there are some unknowns, which we are also figuring out. So building that redundancy onto your on-prem devices or thinking that way is really important.
So one thing I want to add on this, when you touch the redundancy piece, there is a concept of, we call it as a tier 0 service. Yeah. So what does it mean is identify your most critical services where if this service stops, the business stops. So it's really important to have very few services which are in tier 0. That's number one. It not only saves the organization from an on-call perspective for your engineers, the work life gets much better, but you are taking a very ruthless call around what is tier 0. Then you identify the dependencies of that tier 0 service with other services. So you want to cut down those dependencies as well. So that investment in that is super, super critical. That's the way to build more redundancy and more reliability and security, all of that.
Yeah, very well said, Monica. And that, if people are thinking, what is that critical service to be? So I'll give you an example. We call it mission critical services, for example. Think about an airline service. Pick any name, Alaska, Delta, doesn't matter. But if you're in for example, a call center, if you're losing the contact with the call center agent, that may or may not be that critical. There's some latency, of course, your user experience suffers. But if you lose the touch with the air controller somewhere, the pilot is not able to communicate, that can be life-threatening. If you're in financial services and you are into trading, your 5 minutes of loss can be very critical to your organization. Those are the mission critical applications you should be thinking. So just adding to what Monica said.
And the medical one too. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think to me, healthcare comes almost immediately, especially the conversations
Life
happening
and
next
safety.
door. I mean, it's someone's life at the end, right? And I think when you think of that consistently, independent of whether you're building back end or front end, I think the mindset that you bring to how we approach things can be quite different. And I think someone said earlier in one of the panelists, right, like creativity and innovation is going to be so important. And I think these changes in mindsets and thinking of this end-to-end is going to be really critical. But with that, Ashi, let me go back to you. With your diverse background in security, mobile-first development and scaling teams, how do you see building effective teams that are skilled enough for today's technology, but also preparing for the future, which is in many times unknown?
Yeah, so I think, when you're talking about, in terms of, being in different industries, I think one theme is very clear, which is, hiring the right people, right? I know, in this culture, we have very specialized jobs. However, when it comes to network security and infrastructure, we have seen very few people really understand, the systems engineers. Those are the folks that really understand how it starts and how it ends. So having sort of a team that has diversity of mindset when you're building a cloud-like environment, you need very strong hiring patterns in terms of systems engineers. You need to make sure that there are people that are specializing in how do you do database optimization. You need to understand, are you having the right people? Because, we were talking about sort of the cloud cost. One of the big factor in that comes in, using the right kind of hardware could actually really help you save your entire cost. But you need those specialized people that really understand how you can optimize your entire network and your entire stack. So then, once you've hired those folks, another big part of building teams is setting the right culture. As leaders, we all need to make sure what is the P1 priority for us? What are our operating principles? And everybody needs to align to those operating principles. Is our operating principle cost effectiveness? Is it customer centric? Is it and based on those top principles, is reusing everything the way to go, or should we hack and very quickly bring innovation, because what we are trying to do is new in an environment and we need to quickly fail fast and try out new things. So once you've hired folks, you have to establish sort of the right culture as leaders, as CIOs. Folks who are making decisions need to be, or leadership needs to set very clear cultural aspects as to say, what are we going to optimize on? And then rally the entire organization towards that. It makes decision-making faster, it breeds innovation. And last but not the least is diversity, right? We talked about diversity of thought. I think there is sort of diversity in figuring it out. Are you really, really having diverse and inclusive values in your organization? We have seen that having that inclusivity in your team does promote diversity of thought. You actually are better engineers, you build better products. You think 10 times more because you have people that are thinking and expert in different directions. So that would be, higher culture and diversity.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to go back to that question around diversity and inclusivity because I think it's critical. But yeah, Monica, go ahead.
I want to add one point to, and I want to bring this up, like the cost part which you mentioned, and I'm sure a lot of companies are going through that right now, just evaluating the whole cost across people, talent, resources, infrastructure, whatnot. One thing can become very sensitive. It's really, really important that when you talk about cost, you make it clear the context. Because the moment people talk about cost, humans get touched. And when you talk about cost of infrastructure, it is important to help them understand, like, think about the areas in our architecture, in our system, where we are not optimizing. And that turns into real engineering problems, which engineers love to solve. So when you orient the conversation of cost towards that direction, it's a much more healthier conversation. Otherwise, the mindset becomes like, oh, the company wants to reduce the cost, we will have less resources, we'll have to do more, all that stuff. So giving that context is super, super critical.
And Sudha, I'm directing the question to you, but please feel free to chime in because, both of you as well. It's more generic, but as someone who has scaled products and global teams, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered, how you've addressed them, and what do you think those of us that are sitting in this room or perhaps maybe watching this later can take away so that we can do it better going forward?
So let me add both the aspects, right? One, developing big products, and the second is developing teams. Now, when you think about products, I would say product is just one aspect of a solution. So think about end-to-end solution. What are you going to offer to your customers, and what are you going to offer to your market? If you're talking about private connectivity, you may own just a piece of the puzzle, but are you solving for end-to-end encryption when the data flows? So think about that. And when you talk about, for example, the teams, building global teams, I think there are many aspects that we need to think. One piece that everybody is talking about, like, diversity and inclusion, diversity of thoughts. Think about it, your products may or may not be used by the same audience that your team comprises of. Unless you have the diversity of thoughts in your team, you're not going to build the right product. The cultural differences, the data sovereignty differences that can come from every country. You have to think, and you have to think ahead. You're not building a product that will become obsolete in next 4 to 5 years. You don't want to use a technology that will become obsolete in next 3 to 4 years. Think little long term. So, building teams. One thing I found as a mantra that works sometimes, which is building inclusive teams. With, somebody before me, welcome me, was talking from Zoom, right? We used to be 100% at work. Then we went to 100% work from home. And now that everything is opened up, we are somewhere in between. We are 50% work from home, 20% work from home, or we are 50% at work, 20% work from something that is still to be figured out what's the right balance. In this environment, it doesn't matter where you're working from, but being inclusive is absolutely a must-have because the cost of retention today is just a change of technology. So in this environment, how do you build that relationship and inclusivity? Very important to always understand what your team needs. Do you have the right set of leadership sitting at various different places? Do these people feel comfortable sharing with you how they're feeling in an environment where they may not have seen their manager for a very long time? So building and scaling the team is very different from building and scaling the product. In one case, we are using the technology. In other cases, we are using the empathy, a very human element. Do not let go of that element. When you're building and scaling the team, some of your team members coming from various different cultural backgrounds may or may not be exactly apt to the technology that you're building. Do you have the right learning resources in place to make them productive in your work environment? So a lot lies on you. Do not let go of this aspect, which is extremely important as a human being.
I want to add one thing to this. If you really, really want to know, understand what does it mean to build a really successful organizational culture, there's a book. There's a famous author called Patrick Lencioni. And the book, a lot of books have been written by him. And the advantage, there's one book which really talks about what does it mean, how do you build trust, because trust is a very important factor when you build any global team. And more so, right now everybody is global even if they are local, right? So it doesn't matter. But We have implemented that whole book in my team, in my organization, and it works fantastic. So definitely I would recommend reading the book by that author.
That's a great recommendation. So I'm going to go back to, in this audience right now, I think we may have a couple of CEOs, CTOs, hiring managers. I myself very recently led an ERG that was focused on disability inclusion, and I truly believe and have learned over the years that talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. I know each of you is an advocate in your own way for women in STEM, technology, the 50-50 movement. We constitute 50% of the world's population, but we're not really there at every seat where women should be. I mean, forget about talking about other minorities as well. So what would be your one action item that you would like to the CEOs, CTOs, hiring managers, because I think those are very crucial to take away for us to enable this change in the industry, because we can talk ad nauseum, but it is the action that will change this needle. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Sure, I can start, and then Monica and Ashi, please chime in. So looking at my own career, I'll tell you one thing. Majority of my managers have been men. So though I would love to raise my hand and say, we all need to support women, we all need to support diversity, we'll all be there for you, let's just form that community and support each other. There's one part which is missing, and that's allyship. There is no way anyone could be successful if we do not have that allyship from the men in this room. So truly, when I look at the CEOs, CPOs, CTOs, which is still, these positions, a majority of them are owned by men, unless you give the opportunity to someone else to lead who is different from you, the success of the company may or may not happen. Prior to this 2 panel discussions you have seen, they were all men. And there's nothing wrong with it, because this is how the tech world is. So what you're seeing today, it's an anomaly. You don't see all women panel discussion. Not saying whether it's right or wrong. All I'm saying is the allyship which needs to happen will come from the CEOs, CTOs who are holding those positions, unless you give us the opportunity. Look, without you, I wouldn't have been here. As I said, majority of the managers that I had in my career were men. If they had not given me the opportunity, I wouldn't be here. Just continue that momentum, continue that faith that, though gender biasness exists, this gender is different, they may think differently, not just like you, but this opportunity is must.
Yeah, so I would not repeat, Sudha said a lot, which is really good. I will keep it very simple, like everybody has to have an intent, whether they are men or women, because I have also seen the other side as well. There are a lot of women who are in senior positions. They also need to support other women too. And I want to give that perspective as well. As I said, everybody who is in that position can make an impact. And it just takes an intent and a mindset that I want to invest. So when you're hiring, make sure you have a pipeline which can have diversity in your pipeline. Have the same standard of hiring. By no means I'm saying we need to have a different bar, because a lot of times that is a perception and that is wrong. And a lot of women who get to senior positions, they get questioned for that, which is really, really wrong. So it's really important that you keep that bar, have a diverse pipeline, and have an intent.
Well said, well said. I love passionately agree with everything that you all just said. Just to kind of not repeat what you all said, I would actually leave everybody here with an action item. I think everybody in this room considers themselves an ally. Like every manager, every person, every guy that I know considers themselves as an ally. But action is what is, there is intention, there is empathy, but action is very important, right? So one action that I've seen is in many companies that I work for, folks, when diversity, inclusion things get pushed down, on folks, they just figure out how to hire that one woman in their organization. And you all, if you've seen that probably, usually there is that one poor soul sitting in a room or in a staff meeting. And that's what I challenge. I challenge all of you to go back and get 2 of them, get 3 of them. I think that's what makes a big difference. Because when there are 2 women sitting next to you, try bringing up a topic about something that is, electrical work done in the house. You will get diversity of thought because somebody is going to ask you something else. So I would say, get your 2, get your 3.
And one thing, call to action, I'll say it starts from home. So make sure you start from home first, and that's where the magic happens.
No, absolutely agree. And I think women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. I know you all talked about allyship, but I think that intentional sponsorship is, I know I've been a beneficiary of it, Sudha, you talked about it, and we could have a whole panel on how you can implement or become a sponsor. I know many of us in this room are parents, and I don't think, I'm a parent of a son and a daughter, and I hope that when they both enter the workforce, the level playing field is a little more, the field is a little more equal, and they don't encounter some of the things that perhaps some of us have, and those of you sitting in the audience too. But time flies when we're having a great conversation, and with that, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you, and thank you to our audience for giving us the gift of your time.
Thank you.